Hi, welcome to Math Plus Red for our fourth grade students. This unit is on whole number sense. And in this initial unit, we're going to talk a lot about place value up to 1 million. We're going to write numbers in multiple ways, such as expanded form, standard form, and written form. We're also going to compare numbers, and we are going to round. And throughout all of this, we're going to end by doing some focus on some of the key essential skills and making sure that you have put all of these concepts together so that you really have a strong foundation in number sense and place value, because that's going to come in very handy as you begin to multiply and divide numbers, because place value is how we do all of those complicated computations. Now, in the general overview, I talked about how when you open up the lesson, you are going to be given access to the lesson guide and the activity book. And I've opened them up on my computer. The lesson guide is the Learning Coach guide, and then the activity book is the student guide. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and go to page 1, because that is going to start the unit on numbers through 1 million. So I can give you a few tips on how to be successful with this lesson. This one is called all about reading and writing numbers. And you can see we have numbers in word form, and we need to transfer them to standard form. And that means the way that we would write them without, of course, we wouldn't want to write 392,605 like that every time we wrote it. So it's really understanding place value and being able to transfer those numbers. Now, one thing I want you to really be careful of are numbers that have zeros in them. They can be really tricky. And you never want to see the word "and" when you're reading and writing numbers unless there's a decimal. The "and" represents that you have a whole and then part of a whole, or a whole number and then a decimal. And in fourth grade, we aren't getting to decimals. And none of these numbers have "and." And when you write numbers in word form, you are also not going to use the word "and." Now, what you will need to do, there's really no reason to print off this page, because you could easily get a piece of paper or your notebook or your math journal and write number 1 and then transfer this to your math journal. You could also use this little comment feature and type in the answer right here on the page. So we'll continue to scroll through, and you'll see a lot of different options, and a lot of these are very similar, but you need to find the one that is correct. And you could use the highlighting tool if you would like to do that. And let's continue to scroll through. There are some story problems, and where they've taken basic place value but kind of put it in a story problem, so that you have to reason what's the important information in this word problem. Now, as we continue through, we are going to move to expanded form. Now, expanded form means you're really going to think about the value of each digit. Even though there's an 8 and a 7 and a 3 here, they're not just an 8, a 7, and a 3. This 3 is worth 3,000. It has a value of 3,000 because it's in the thousands. The 7 has a value of 10,000. So that's why it's worth, or 70,000, because it's in the 10,000s. And right here we have a 0 in the tens. And so you notice there's nothing here for the tens. We have our ones, and we skip all the way up to 100s. So when we write numbers in expanded form, even though this only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers added together, it doesn't mean that our final number is only going to have 5 digits in it. We always need to look at that first number, and it has 6 places, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So our final number is also going to have 6 places, and it kind of gives us a clue that there might be a 0 hidden in there. So as you continue working through, it's going to give you examples of even how to check your answer, especially when there is maybe only 5 things to add and there's a hidden 0. Then after you move into finish with expanded form, and again, lots of them are very tricky, so you have to really look closely at the value of every single digit. You're going to move into some other things, such as comparing numbers and then rounding numbers. Now, when you compare numbers, what I always recommend, and this is a good strategy to use, is I like to write the numbers one on top of the other, because you're going to compare numbers by the value of each digit. And here we have a 9 and a 9, so they both have a value of 900,000. But then we have a 0 and a 1. And so I don't have to look at that entire huge number. All I have to look at is that 0 and the 1, because I know there's no 10,000s, but this has one 10,000. So this number is automatically larger, and I know that because of that one digit right there. And now you're going to fill in the missing number. Again, you don't have to have this printed out. You could easily just state this orally to your mom or your dad or your learning coach, or you could write this problem into your math journal. And then as we continue moving along, and I'm going to show you some other things you could do also besides even using a workbook page. As you continue through that, you're going to get into rounding. And you might hear some words that you may not have used before, like boundary numbers and midpoints and things like that. So boundary numbers mean the numbers that come on each side. Sometimes you hear the word benchmark numbers. They're the numbers that this number comes in between. So if we're rounding to the nearest 100,000, the boundary numbers are going to be 100,000s. And this number is going to fall somewhere in between those numbers. So they're going to talk a lot about how to round or get to the nearest boundary number. And I also have some resources and videos to show you about that as well, so that if you're confused by this and you don't understand when to round up or when to round down, you can watch some of these videos to give you some special tricks. Here we have a number, and you're going to round it to lots of different places, that same number, but it's going to change values every single time you round. And then we're going to move on, and there's a unit or a lesson checkpoint included here. And like I said, it goes all the way up to 1 million in 4th grade. So you really need to understand your place value up to thousands before you transition to millions. Also, one thing to really pay attention to in this activity book are clues that help you be a better mathematician. For example, this is a self-check rubric so that you can say, did I do this? Did I explain my thinking clearly? Did I try new ways to make sure my answer is reasonable and to check my answer? Did I think about the problem before I just automatically just jumped in there and started answering it? Did I read the problem carefully? So definitely check out all of those tips. And this lesson happens to have a printable checkpoint. Not all lessons will have a printable checkpoint, but this unit does. And so you can answer this checkpoint again online, or like right here by using the highlighting tool, or orally to your parents. But I recommend a math journal or a notebook filled with paper that you can transition your thoughts and keep record of what you have been learning, so that you'll have a good review packet. Now I'm going to head over to the parents or the learning coach lesson guide. And again, you can go over to this menu. The most important part of every lesson is the very final lesson, because this is what brings it all together. And you can see all the resources. There's place value charts, number lines, things like that you can print out to use, or again, it might give you just an idea of what you can use to draw in your math journal. But I'm going to go ahead and open up this extended response. And here you can see that it's taken all of the things in the unit and transferred it into a check for understanding. So one thing that I think is really difficult for students to understand is that the same number can often be represented in different ways. Even though we know this has 2,000s, 300s, 4 10s, and 5 1s, what if we are only asked, well, how many 10s and 1s? Well, it would have 234 10s and 5 1s. So it's important to help students understand that we don't always have to write the number in the same way. Here we could say, well, there's 2,000s, 20 or 34 10s, and 5 1s. Then we move down and we write numbers that are represented in different ways in the standard form. So we have some expanded form, we have some word form, but we're going to write it in standard form, and watch out for those tricky zeros. And then we're going to compare numbers that were written on that chart. And then we're going to do some more comparing numbers. And then it's going to give you the chance to fill in and estimate and do some critical thinking. And a lot of these activities are going to be graded by the learning coach, but some will be graded by the teacher. So throughout the year, there's going to be 3 of these that you'll actually submit to the teacher for grading. And right there, there's a answer key, so that if you're confused and don't know what to do and aren't sure if your student's answering it correctly, you go right there to the answer key. But what I want to show you right now is an alternative. Sometimes I'm going to use my document camera here. Sometimes there may be something that's even better than using a workbook. Maybe your child does better with hands-on activities. So let's say we want to compare numbers, and maybe your child likes the cards, or maybe they like to roll dice. And there's lots of options for even virtual dice. So I have some cards here, and this is a great game. And even though this particular number chart only goes to 10,000s, you could easily write out additional place values up to millions. So you could kind of compete with your child and say, okay, here is a king. And so let's pretend that the kings are ones. And so I could maybe say, well, I know that that doesn't have much value because we're trying to get the largest number, so I'm going to write the 1 there. Well, maybe you wrote the 1 there on your own separate sheet. I'm doing it all on 1 for now. Let's pick another number. Okay, we have a 3. So maybe we'll put the 3 here and the 3 here. And let's see. Let's say the jokers are zeros. And so I'm going to put the 0 here, and you're going to put it here. And here we have a 6. I'll put a 6 here, and you can put a 6 in the same spot. We have a 2 and a 2. And so then we can share our answers with each other to see who has the largest number. And so we could start with the 10,000s and compare, and the thousands and compare. And I noticed that this is where it's different. So this number right here is greater than this number. We could also take this digit or number and write it in expanded form. So it's a great way to take exactly what's being taught on that worksheet, but make it a little bit more hands-on. Now in Class Connect sessions, teachers are going to use a lot of tools like this. This is a DigiBlock, and we can see how to compare place value, and we see that there's 10 ones that make a 10, and then that these 10 tens make 100. And so sometimes your child will need a hands-on manipulative to play with, and I'm going to show you some virtual tools in just a second. This is another fun activity, and I'll share this with you as well. This is the Space Chase place value game. And so you can make a spinner out of a pencil and a paper clip, and I'm just going to stick it right here in the middle, and I'm going to spin, and I landed, I'll say, on a 4. And so again, using that same type of place value chart, you can say, well, I say my 4 is going to be in the 10,000s place, and I'm going to get this little Space Chase McKiwi, and he's going to be mine. So I'm going to capture McKiwi, and I'm going to put the 4 in the 10,000s place. And then the next person can spin, and they can decide, well, I am going to put a 2 in the tens place, and I'm going to capture Scanzanob. And so you can compete with your own little place value chart and see who ends up building the largest number. And there's directions with this game, but again, a fun way to compare numbers. You could also then take that number that you built and write it in expanded form and talk about the place value of each digit. Now, one thing that I think students have a hard time with is maybe they have a number that has lots of 3s, and understanding that each of these 3s, even though they look the same, their value is very different based on their place within a number. Now, also, since this unit focuses on rounding, I would encourage you to use your math journal, and let's say we are going to round this number right here to the nearest 1,000. So I'm going to underline that 1,000, and we want the students to think about, well, where would this number come in between on a number line? Now, we could easily have our children just answer a multiple choice question and click on an answer and be done with it. But when they have to build their own number line and they think about the boundary numbers or benchmark numbers that this number comes in between, they learn so much more because it's hands-on, they're involved, they're reasoning with the math instead of somebody just handing them the math and just getting an answer. We want them to go through the process, understand the process, not just get a product. So I know that this number, if I'm rounding to the thousands, is in between 333,000 and 334,000. And then right in the middle of this is going to be my midpoint. And the midpoint, in between 333,000 and 334,000, is going to be 333,500, and that 5 gives us a clue that we're right here in the midpoint. So we have to decide, where does this go? 333,333. Well, there's a 3 in the hundreds. That's less than 500. So my 300 would be somewhere over here. I know I have 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900 to my next 1,000. So it would be 1, 2, 3, somewhere right in here. Since it's closer to this number, I would round down to 333,000. And because I had to think about the increments, I had to think about the placement, I had to think about the midpoint, I had to think about the benchmark or boundary numbers, I learned so much more from writing it myself than just clicking on an answer. You also want to encourage your child to explain their thinking as they're working, because that's what's going to be expected of them on the upcoming Georgia Milestones assessment when they see that at the end of the year. The other thing that I want to show you are some online tools. Sorry, I'm going to escape out of this and show you some other online tools and resources that we have. So let's go to the virtual manipulatives, and I'll share this link with you. You do not have to select a grade, but we can select 4th grade, and let's go to WorkMats, and let's go to place value to millions. You could easily use this sheet online and roll dice and do all sorts of fun things. And then you can use this pen tool to write in numbers and, compete against each other or compare numbers. You can also go to the manipulatives, go to base 10 blocks, and you can build certain numbers. So let's say that we have our thousands. We have 1,000. I'll build it right here. We have 1,100, and we have a 10 and a 1, so 1,111. So we could write that on our place value chart, 1,111, and talk about comparing those digits and how they change value. But there's lots of fun things that you can do with virtual manipulatives, that even if you don't have access to every single manipulative at your home, there are tons of resources online. The other thing that I want to share with you is the GCA Math website. So if you go to gcamath.com and click on the Math Resources tab, you will have access to all the different grade levels. So if your child is really struggling with basic place value and rounding to smaller numbers, go back and review some of those skills in 2nd and 3rd grade, and then you can move on to the 4th grade tab. When you open up the 4th grade tab, you can go to this Numbers and Operations in Base 10, and it is going to go over lots and lots of videos. One concept that is not necessarily covered thoroughly in this unit that is very important in the overall standards, the Georgia Common Core standards, is how the digits become 10 times bigger than it's placed to the than on the right and the left, and so it talks about how you can compare those numbers. This is a selection of videos on expanded form and comparing numbers. There's also lots of games. There's some quizzes online, and then here's some additional rounding videos and games that you can use in addition to what is provided in the K-12 curriculum. Sometimes children learn best when they see things presented in different formats. The other thing I want to share with you is Learnzillion. In the newsletter, you're going to see codes that go with the lessons of this unit. And this, when you log in, it's a free account, so you could just simply go right here, and I'm going to type in LZ523 and click enter. And this lesson, I believe, is going to open up to a rounding lesson, and you can see it's right here. It says locate benchmark numbers on a number line. So it helps you go through all the stages of how to find benchmark numbers. Then it talks about rounding numbers and finding midpoints. It also, this video right here is going to talk about what do you do when there's a 9. How do you round 9s? Because it ends up going to the next possibly century or decade. So it's important to talk about what's going to happen when you have a 9. Well, the benchmark numbers are going to change. So Learnzillion is a great resource to have. And then the other thing I want to share with you that I'm going to provide the link for is the Common Core Georgia Performance Standards Frameworks for 4th grade. And in this is the guide that a lot of brick and mortar schools use. And in this guide, I'm going to scroll through. There's lots of information about the standards. There's things about misconceptions students make. There's good guiding questions that are great for you to ask your student, like, well, what determines the value of a number? So these are great questions so that you know that your child is competing with children across the state in the same type of questioning and format. There are games in here, and you can also, let's say you go to the task name. I'm going to go right here to Number Scramble. I can click on that link and it's going to take me right to that game. And it's going to, like I said, go over what the standard is. It's going to tell you what materials you may need, but it's going to teach the concept in maybe a little different way. This one, it tells you to get digit cards, and I'll scroll down so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. You can just print out or write, the numbers 0 through 9 on index cards or something. And then it says make the largest whole number possible using 9 different tiles. Make the smallest number using 9 different tiles. Make a number larger than 2 million with the 6 and the tens thousands place. So games like this that are hands-on, and maybe your child can move those index cards around and build numbers, can often be so much more engaging and fun than just answering a workbook page. And you can ask lots of guiding questions as your child answers these questions as well. So when you go and conquer this unit in Math Plus Red, you'll notice that there are lesson checkpoints at the end of several of the lessons, and some do not. For the lesson checkpoint, this one is probably online. When there's 2 lesson checkpoints, it probably means that there's one that's online and one that's offline for the learning coach to do with their student. So I hope you enjoy building numbers, comparing numbers, and writing numbers in lots of different ways. I look forward to providing an overview of the next unit where we really are going to start using this place value to compute with numbers. So having a very strong foundation with place value is going to help with multiplication, adding, subtracting, and dividing. So talk to you next time, and I hope you have a fantastic mathematical year.